This is craziest HOA moments. The cones came out, and so did the receipts. Karen yelled that my walkway was unsafe and the fine was already being processed. I just watched you pile snow at the curb and that is non-compliance, she shouted, clipboard shaking in her gloved hand. I had not even finished carrying boxes inside. Snow was still falling, my driveway was a mess, and this woman in a purple coat was standing at my door with a violation notice already printed and dated. I am Barbara Roberts, Special Assessment Coordinator for Quarry Ridge Frostline Homeowners Association, she said, snapping on a pair of rubber gloves like she was about to perform surgery. Your snow removal is in violation of Section 4.3, and the fine is $250, effective immediately. I work as a park ranger, so I value quiet and rules that make sense. This did not make sense. I moved into this Oakland neighborhood 3 hours ago, the storm started 2 hours ago, and I had not even unpacked my shovel yet. Barbara tapped the clipboard with one gloved finger. The photos show your contractor pushed snow into the street right of way, which blocks emergency access and violates county code. I have all day, and so does my fine meter. I looked past her at the curb. There was no contractor. There was no plow berm. There was just fresh snow falling on an empty driveway. I pointed that out. She smiled, thin and cold. The photos were taken this morning at 6:15 before you arrived. Your property was cited under prior ownership non-compliance carryover. I felt my stomach drop. I just moved in, I said. I cannot afford to lose this place or get dragged into court over something I did not do. Barbara shrugged. Then you should have reviewed the enforcement history before closing. I can make this a lean conversation in one email. She turned and walked down the steps, boots crunching through the snow. I watched her pull a rolling file cart from the back of a white sedan parked at the curb, the cart stacked with binders and laminated sheets. I stood there with the box still in my hands, breath steaming, while sleet started tapping against my coat. My driveway had to be accessible for an early shift tomorrow, and a plow berm could trap my car if the city crew came through tonight. I needed to shovel fast, but Barbara was already wheeling her cart back up the walkway. She stopped halfway and pulled out a laminated page. This is the snow compliance hotline number. All violations are logged and time-stamped. If you fail to remediate within 4 hours, the fee doubles and we initiate towing authorization. She clipped the page to my doorframe with a binder clip and walked away. I pulled the page down. The hotline number had no area code. The listed compliance window was 2 hours, not 4. The date on the laminated sheet was from last winter. I called the HOA management company. The receptionist put me on hold for 6 minutes, then transferred me to a voicemail that said the compliance department was unavailable until Monday. It was Thursday. I called my real estate agent. She sighed. Quarry Ridge Frostline is known for this. They run a snow compliance hotline that Barbara controls, and she writes the notices herself. The board rubber stamps everything. Did you get the CC&Rs packet? I did. I pulled it out of a box and flipped to Section 4.3. It said homeowners must keep walkways clear within 24 hours of snow cessation. Nothing about contractor liability. Nothing about carryover violations. Nothing about street right-of-way placement. I sent a photo of the page to my agent. She replied in seconds. That is the correct clause. Barbara is quoting something else. You need to document everything and do not engage until you have proof she is lying. I grabbed my phone and stepped outside. The storm was picking up, sleet tapping harder now. I took photos of the driveway, the curb, the empty street. No plow berm, no contractor, no snow pile blocking anything. I took a photo of the laminated sheet Barbara clipped to my door, zooming in on the mismatched date. Then I called my snow removal contractor, the guy my agent recommended. He picked up on the first ring. I need you here tonight, I said. I have an early shift and the HOA is already threatening fines. He was quiet for a second. Quarry Ridge Frostline? I am not going back there. Barbara tried to audit my shovel path last month and said I was non-compliant because I left a half inch of packed snow. She threatened to revoke my vendor license. I told her that is not a real thing, and she called the county to report me for unlicensed snow removal. It took 3 weeks to clear that up. I am done with that neighborhood. He hung up. I stood in the driveway with sleet soaking into my jacket. My contractor refused to return because Barbara tried to audit his shovel path, and now I had no way to clear the snow before my shift. I grabbed a shovel from the garage and started clearing the walkway myself. Every scrape echoed in the cold air. I worked fast, pushing snow to the lawn edge, staying clear of the curb. 15 minutes in, headlights swept across the driveway. A white sedan pulled up, and Barbara stepped out with her rolling file cart. She walked straight up to me, clipboard in hand. "You are piling snow on your lawn," she said. "That creates runoff pooling, which is a drainage violation under Section 6.8. I stopped shoveling. I was not piling snow in the street. I was putting it on my own lawn, away from the walkway." Barbara pointed at the cart. "I have a reference guide." She pulled out a binder and flipped to a page with a hand-drawn diagram. The diagram showed a lawn with X's marked over half of it. "No snow placement in primary lawn zones," she read. "Secondary placement requires a drainage review and a $50 processing fee." I stared at the diagram. It was not in the CC&Rs. It was not even printed on HOA letterhead. It looked like something she drew herself. "Where is this rule in the actual CC&Rs?" I asked. Barbara snapped the binder shut. "The board adopted it as an emergency interim measure last winter. It is enforceable under General Compliance Authority." I pulled out my phone. "Show me the board meeting minutes where this was adopted." She smiled. "Those minutes are restricted to board members and compliance officers. If you want access, you need to submit a formal records request with a $10 processing fee and wait 14 business days." I watched her pile on threats, because that is exactly what I needed her to do. Every word she said was digging her deeper. I kept my voice calm. "I will submit the request tomorrow." Barbara shrugged. "That is fine. Your fine is still due in 4 hours, and if you do not pay, it doubles, and we move to lien filing." She turned and walked back to her car, cartwheels rattling over the ice. I went inside and pulled up the CC&Rs on my laptop. Section 6.8 was about stormwater management for new construction projects. It had nothing to do with snow placement. I searched for any mention of emergency interim measures or board compliance authority. Nothing. I opened my email and drafted a records request to the management company, attaching photos of the driveway, the laminated sheet, and Barbara's hand-drawn diagram. I sent it with a read receipt. Then I called a local journalist contact my agent gave me, a reporter who covered municipal issues. Her name was Claire. She answered fast. "You are calling about Quarry Ridge frost line," she said. I can tell by the tone. I explained the situation. She listened without interrupting. "Barbara has been doing this for 2 winters now," Claire said. "The management company admits they backdated notices to trigger late fees faster, but nobody has taken them to court yet because the fines are just low enough that most people pay rather than fight. You need to prove she is quoting fake rules and that the notices are fabricated. If you can do that at a public meeting, the board has to respond on the record." "What kind of proof?" I asked. "Dates, photos, CC&R citations, anything that shows she altered documents or invented rules. And you need witnesses." I thanked her and hung up. I had the photos. I had the CC&Rs. I needed more. I opened my email and checked the HOA portal login my agent sent me. The portal had a compliance section with a list of recent violations. I clicked through. My address was listed 3 times, all dated within the last 6 hours. Each violation had a different timestamp and a different offense: snow piling, drainage pooling, and unsafe walkway. The attached photos were identical, just cropped differently. I saved screenshots. Then I noticed something. Each violation notice had a reference number. The numbers were sequential, but the timestamps were not. 2 of them were logged before I even arrived at the property. I took more screenshots and sent them to Claire. She replied in minutes. That is fabrication. If she logged violations before you moved in, she is either recycling old complaints or inventing them outright. You need to find out who approved those notices. I checked the portal again. Each violation notice had an approval signature line at the bottom. All 3 were signed by the same person, Barbara Roberts. She was approving her own notices. I saved everything and backed it up to cloud storage. Then I checked my bank account. I had enough to cover the fine, but paying it felt like surrender. I decided to wait. If Barbara wanted to escalate, I would let her. Every move she made was more evidence. I finished shoveling the walkway and cleared the driveway entrance. By the time I was done, it was past midnight and the sleet had turned to heavy snow. I went inside, stripped off my wet jacket, and collapsed on the couch. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the HOA portal. Your payment is overdue. A late fee of $125 has been applied. Total due, $375. The email was timestamped 4 minutes after the original deadline. I took a screenshot and added it to my evidence folder. The next morning, I woke up to another email. This one was a certified letter scan from the management company. It was a formal notice demanding fees and pretending the snow policy was law. The letter cited Section 4.3, Section 6.8, and a new section I had never seen, Section 9.2, titled Emergency Weather Compliance Standards. I searched the CC&Rs. Section 9.2 did not exist. The letter was signed by Barbara and countersigned by the HOA president, a man named Gerald Tinker. I called the management company. The receptionist transferred me to the compliance department. A woman answered. "This is Linda." I explained the situation. She put me on hold. When she came back, her voice was flat. "Our records show your violations are legitimate and were approved by the compliance officer. If you dispute the charges, you need to request a hearing with the board. The next available date is March 10th. It was January 15th. I asked about the fabricated Section 9.2. She hesitated. "I will escalate that to the property manager. You should receive a response within 5 business days." I hung up. I did not have 5 days. My driveway was buried again from overnight snow, and my shift started in 3 hours. I grabbed my shovel and went outside. The plow had come through and left a 2-foot berm across my driveway entrance. I started breaking it apart, chunks of ice flying with every strike. A truck pulled up. It was a gate technician with a tool bag walking up the driveway mid-argument with someone on his phone. He stopped when he saw me. "You live here?" I nodded. He pointed at the community gate at the end of the block. That gate has been cycling open and closed every 5 minutes for the last 2 days. The logs show repeated access failures tied to an admin account. Your HOA hired me to fix it, but the admin keep overriding my resets. "Who is the admin?" I asked. He checked his phone. "Barbara Roberts." I stopped shoveling. Barbara controlled the gate access system. If the gate was failing, it was because of her account. I asked the technician if he could pull the logs. He shrugged. "I can give you a summary. The failures started last week and they are all triggered by invalid credential attempts from her login. It looks like she is trying to lock someone out, but the system keeps rejecting her overrides." "Can you email me that summary?" I asked. He nodded and took my email address. I finished clearing the berm and drove to my shift. The whole time I kept thinking about the gate logs. If Barbara was using her admin access to harass residents, that was a bigger problem than fake snow violations. I needed to connect it to the evidence I already had. If you are loving this HOA drama, smash that like button and subscribe for more stories where Karens get exactly what they deserve. When I got home that night, the gate technician's email was waiting. The log showed 47 failed access attempts over 5 days, all from Barbara's account, all targeting 3 resident credentials, including mine. I forwarded the email to Claire. She called me 10 minutes later. This is your trump card, she said. If you can show the board that Barbara used her admin access to harass residents and fabricated violations to cover it up, the whole system collapses. You need to deploy this at the right moment, in front of witnesses, so nobody can bury it. When is the next board meeting? I checked the HOA portal. The next public meeting was in 4 days. I sent Claire the date. She said she would be there. The next day, I received another fabricated violation notice with altered dates and recycled photos. This one claimed I left my snow shovel leaning against the garage door, which was classified as visible storage and violated Section 3.6. The attached photo was from 2 days ago, cropped to hide the timestamp. I took a new photo of the same spot, showing the timestamp and the fact that the shovel was now inside the garage. I saved both photos side by side. Then I got a knock at the door. It was a surprise inspection crew in reflective vests, clipboards in hand, with Barbara standing behind them. "We are here to conduct a compliance walkthrough," one of them said. "This is authorized under emergency weather protocols." I blocked the doorway. "Show me the authorization." He handed me a printed form. It was on HOA letterhead, signed by Barbara, dated that morning. The form cited Section 9.2 again. I took a photo of it and stepped aside. "Go ahead," I said. They walked through, checking the walkway, the driveway, the garage. Barbara followed, pointing out imaginary violations. "Your boot scraper is 3 inches from the step edge," she said. "That is a trip hazard under Section 7.4. I checked the CC&Rs on my phone while they worked. Section 7.4 was about fence heights, nothing about boot scrapers. The crew finished and handed me a summary sheet. 6 violations, total fines $850. I asked for copies of the photos they took. One of them hesitated. "Those are internal compliance records. You can request them through the management company." I smiled. "I am requesting them now." He looked at Barbara. She shook her head. "Internal records are restricted during active enforcement. You will receive copies if you appeal." They left. I took photos of their truck, their vests, and the summary sheet. Then I checked the sheet closely. The listed violations referenced sections that did not exist, and the fine amounts did not match the fee schedule in the CC&Rs. I added everything to my evidence folder. I now had fabricated notices, backdated photos, fake rule citations, admin access abuse, and a crew conducting inspections under non-existent authority. I was ready for the board meeting. 2 days before the meeting, I received a certified letter mid-storm. I caught the postmark immediately. It was dated 3 days earlier, but it arrived today. The letter inside was another lien threat, claiming I owed over $1,500 in fines and late fees. The breakdown included charges I had never seen before: non-compliance processing fee, records request denial fee, and inspection overhead cost. I photographed the envelope, the postmark, and every page of the letter. Then I called Claire. She told me to bring everything to the meeting and be ready to present it in under 3 minutes. "Boards hate long complaints," she said. "You need to hit them with the smoking gun fast, then let them react." I spent the next 2 days organizing my evidence into a timeline: violation notices with altered dates, recycled photos, fabricated rule sections, gate access logs, backdated letters, and the fake inspection. I printed copies for every board member and made extras for the audience. I also printed the actual CC&Rs pages that Barbara misquoted, with the correct sections tabbed and highlighted. The night of the meeting, I arrived early. The meeting was held at the community clubhouse, a small building near the main gate. Claire was already there, sitting in the back row. I sat near the front. Barbara arrived 10 minutes later, rolling file cart in tow. She parked the cart next to the board table and took her seat. The HOA president, Gerald Tinker, called the meeting to order. The agenda included a budget review, landscaping bids, and a compliance report. Barbara stood up for the compliance report. She opened her file cart and pulled out a binder. "We have had an increase in snow violations this winter," she said. "Several properties are in active enforcement. including a new resident who has accumulated over $1,500 in fines. I raised my hand. Gerald looked annoyed. Public comment is at the end. I stayed standing. This is about false charges and fabricated records. I need 3 minutes. Gerald hesitated, then nodded. Make it quick. I walked to the front and handed out my evidence packets. I slid a tab timeline to the board and the room at the same time. Barbara Roberts has fabricated violations, backdated notices, invented rule sections, and abused her admin access to harass residents, I said. I pointed to the timeline. These notices were logged before I moved into the property. These rule sections do not exist in the CC&Rs. These photos were recycled and cropped to hide timestamps. And these gate logs show repeated access failures tied to her admin account, targeting my credentials and 2 other residents. I held up the certified letter. This letter was postmarked 3 days after the date on the notice, which means it was backdated to trigger late fees faster. I looked at Barbara. She was gripping the edge of the table, face pale. Gerald flipped through the packet. Where did you get the gate logs? From the technician you hired to fix the gate, I said. He will confirm everything in that summary if you ask him. One of the board members, a woman named Susan, looked at Barbara. Is this true? Did you fabricate these notices? Barbara stood up. These are legitimate violations under emergency protocols. Gerald cut her off. What emergency protocols? Show me the board resolution that adopted Section 9.2. Barbara opened her file cart and started flipping through binders. The board adopted it last winter, she said. Susan shook her head. I was on the board last winter. We never voted on any emergency protocols. Show us the minutes. Barbara kept flipping. Her hands were shaking now. I can pull the minutes from the archive, she said. Gerald leaned forward. Barbara, did you invent Section 9.2? Barbara slammed the binder shut. I have all day, and so does my fine meter. She was repeating her catchphrase, but her voice cracked. Susan stood up. That is not an answer. Gerald, I move to suspend all enforcement actions tied to Barbara's compliance role, effective immediately. Another board member seconded. Gerald called the vote. It passed 4-1. Barbara sat down hard. Her rolling file cart tipped over, spilling binders across the floor. I was not done. I held up the gate logs. Barbara also used her admin access to lock residents out of the community gate. The technician's report shows 47 failed attempts, all targeting resident credentials. If you check the access policy, that is grounds for immediate removal from any admin role. Gerald took the logs and read them. He looked at Barbara. You are removed from compliance officer duties, effective immediately. The board will vote on a replacement at the next meeting. All fines issued under your authority in the last 6 months are under review. Barbara stood up, face red. You cannot do that. I can make this a lean conversation in one email. Susan laughed. You already tried that. It did not work. Barbara grabbed her coat and walked out, leaving the rolling file cart and the spilled binders behind. Claire caught my eye from the back row and gave me a thumbs up. Gerald adjourned the meeting. I stayed to talk to the board members. Susan apologized for the enforcement mess and said the board would refund all fabricated fines within 10 business days. Another board member asked for copies of my evidence to forward to the management company. I gave him everything. As I was leaving, the gate technician walked up. I heard what happened in there, he said. The management company called me an hour ago and told me to lock Barbara out of the admin system. I already did it. He handed me a printed summary of the lockout confirmation. I thanked him and walked out into the cold night. Snow was falling again, light and steady. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the management company. Your account has been credited for all fines and fees issued under Compliance Officer Barbara Roberts. Your balance is 0. I leaned against my car and exhaled, breath steaming in the cold air. The next week, I received a follow-up email from the HOA president. The board had voted to hire an independent auditor to review all compliance actions from the last 2 years. The audit found that Barbara had fabricated over 60 violation notices across 12 properties, backdated 32 letters, and collected nearly $20,000 in fake fines. The management company refunded every fraudulent charge and terminated their contract with Barbara. The board also discovered that Barbara had altered meeting minutes to cover her fake rule adoptions. The corrected minutes were posted to the HOA portal, showing that Section 9.2 and the emergency snow protocols were never approved by the board. The minutes recorded the reversal and the reason: compliance officer misconduct and falsification of records. Barbara's credibility collapsed in front of witnesses when residents started comparing notes and realized she had targeted multiple families with the same fabricated playbook. 2 weeks later, I was clearing snow from my walkway when I saw a tow truck pull up at Barbara's house, 3 doors down. The driver knocked on her door and handed her a stack of paperwork. I could not hear what they were saying, but Barbara's face went white. She argued for a minute, then went inside and came back with a checkbook. She wrote a check and handed it to the driver. He nodded and left. I found out later from Claire that the tow vendor canceled the HOA contract after seeing the evidence packet and refunded every charge from the crackdown. Barbara had been paying the tow company directly to prioritize enforcement in the neighborhood, and when the vendor found out the violations were fabricated, they pulled out and demanded reimbursement for the contract fees Barbara had collected under false pretenses. The final kicker came at the next board meeting, a public meeting moment where the minutes turned against Karen. The board voted to remove Barbara from all HOA roles permanently and filed a formal complaint with the county about her misuse of the compliance hotline and admin access. Gerald read the resolution aloud, and the audience applauded. Barbara did not attend. Spring came and the snow melted. I was out front planting flowers when Susan stopped by. She was the board member who pushed for the audit. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "Barbara was running that compliance scam for 2 years, and nobody had the proof to stop her until you did." The board is implementing new oversight rules. All violations have to be approved by 2 board members. All rule changes require a public vote, and the compliance hotline is now managed by the management company, not a single officer. She handed me a revised CC and Rs packet. We also clarified Section 4.3. It now explicitly states that snow removal liability starts 24 hours after snow stops, and there is no such thing as contractor carryover or prior ownership violations. I thanked her and went back to planting. That afternoon, I got a call from Claire. She was writing a follow-up story about HOA enforcement abuse and wanted to feature my case. I agreed, and the story ran the next week. It included interviews with 3 other residents Barbara had targeted, all of them describing the same fabricated notices, backdated letters, and fake rule citations. The story went local, then picked up regional attention. The management company issued a public apology and announced they were reviewing contracts with every HOA in their portfolio to prevent similar abuse. Barbara moved out in June. I saw the moving truck from my window. Her rolling file cart was the last thing loaded, still stuffed with binders and laminated sheets. A few neighbors came out to watch, and one of them muttered good riddance. I did not say anything. I just went back inside and made coffee. That evening, I got a message from the new compliance officer, a retired teacher named Margaret, who the board hired to replace Barbara. She introduced herself and said she was reviewing all active cases to make sure they were legitimate. "Your file is clean," she wrote. "No violations, no fines, no history." I appreciated that. I also appreciated that Margaret did not carry a rolling file cart or wear rubber gloves for intimidation. She just did the job without turning it into a power trip. A year later, I was shoveling snow again. Light snow, nothing dramatic. A neighbor walked by and waved. "You are the guy who took down Barbara," he said. "I heard about that." "Thank you." I shrugged. "I just documented what she did and showed it to the board." He laughed. "Yeah, but nobody else did that." We all just paid the fines and moved on. "You made it stop." He kept walking. I finished shoveling and went inside. My phone buzzed. It was an email from the board. The annual meeting was next week, and they were recognizing residents who contributed to community improvements. My name was on the list. I did not go to the ceremony, but I heard later that Gerald gave a short speech about the importance of oversight and accountability. He did not mention Barbara by name, but everyone knew what he was talking about. The funny thing is, I never wanted to be the guy who fought the HOA. I just wanted to shovel my driveway and go to work without being harassed. But Barbara pushed so hard, fabricated so much, and threatened so loudly that she left me no choice. And in the end, that is what brought her down. Not my evidence, not the board, not the management company. It was her own certainty that she could pile on threats without consequences. She was wrong. The last I heard, Barbara was living 2 towns over, and she was no longer involved in any HOA. The tow vendor spread the word in the industry, and no other management company would hire her. The gate technician told me she tried to apply for a compliance job in another neighborhood, but when they called for references, the Quarry Ridge board declined to provide one. That was enough. I still live in the same house. My driveway is clear every winter. My walkway is safe. And my compliance file is empty. Sometimes I see Margaret at the mailbox cluster, and she always says hello. She does not carry a clipboard or wear gloves. She just does the job the way it should be done, fairly, transparently, and without making up rules to punish people she does not like. That is all I ever wanted. That and the chance to shovel my snow in peace. More HOA drama soon.